Welcome to Love for the Truth Radio, a program devoted to encouraging you to be a contender of the faith in an ever-changing church culture. On Love for the Truth Radio, we will discuss current issues and challenging views along with biblical truth that can affect our Christian worldview and how we live out our faith. And now, here's your host, Cindy Hartline.
Welcome to another program where we discuss current news and challenging views from a biblical worldview. You know, there is so much deception going on in the world today that it's hard to keep up as to where it's coming from. Well, of course, we know that deception is from Satan, who is the prince and power of the air. And boys, he's spewing out those lies through much of the media, through TV, radio, literature, theater, etc. However, one vehicle is hardly spoken of. In fact, it's a mystery place to some and, sadly, a place of refuge for others. The Burning Man Festival, a huge gathering in the desert, often recognized as a hidden city that sets up camp for a week and then travels readily to another, exhibits many features commonly found in cults and new religious movements. The events are characterized by heightened degrees of transpersonalism, collective ecstasis, utopian narratives, and community allegiance. One strong feature is their strong promotion of radical rituals that can transform one's mind and heart forever, away from the God we as Christians speak of. Many transformational festivals are setting up camp all over the world, enticing thousands to attend. These fests have a huge part in changing our culture. The expert on this subject is our guest, Carl Teichrib. Carl is a researcher, writer, and conference communicator who focuses on the paradigm shift sweeping the Western world, including political globalization and socio-religious trends, transhumanism, and important cultural movements. His personal research began in the early 1990s, and in 1997, this transitioned into a full-time endeavor. Over the years, he has attended a range of political, religious, and techno-social events in his quest to understand the historical and contemporary forces of world change. Carl's articles and reports have been utilized by Christian authors, information ministries, media hosts, and by pastors and professors. From 2007 until 2015, Carl edited and produced the monthly digest, Forcing Change. Currently, Carl is working on a forthcoming book, Game of Gods, the Temple of Man in the Age of Reenchantment. Carl Teichrib lives in the Canadian prairies with his wife and family. Welcome, Carl Teichrib. It's a pleasure having you on Love for the Truth Radio again.
Cindy, I'm looking forward to this. Thank you so much for inviting me back on your program.
Oh, you know, Carl, we've talked about these transformational festivals for so long, you know, and to me, it's one of the most important programs that our audience needs to hear. You know, Carl, you talk about a paradigm shift that's sweeping the Western world, especially in the areas of socio-religious trends. And I have to say that what we're going to be talking about today, I believe, is a huge trend right now. You attended Burning Man, a festival which seems to be almost like a cultural movement that you talk about. And these festivals are referred to as transformational festivals. But why don't we explain to our audience, we might have new listeners, which I believe we do, what is a transformational festival?
Well, I'm going to back up just a little bit. I've been doing this type of research work, trying to understand oneness and globalism for a long time, since the early 1990s. From 1997 on, I've been doing this full time, and in this type of work, of course, you end up looking at the political side of globalism and oneness. You take a look at the religious side, the interfaith movement, the technological side with transhumanism. These are understood, but for the longest time, it was kind of bothering me. There needs to be a cultural aspect to this. If oneness is becoming the dominant kind of worldview or the underlying foundation of how so many people are thinking, whether they say it implicitly or explicitly or hold it implicitly. There has to be some type of a cultural aspect to this, an expression. And that's what transformational festivals are. They are an expression of the worldview already being held by a large percentage of our society, including Christians. And oneness is can be best described this way. It's a philosophy or a perspective that says all is interconnected. Man, God, nature, we're all connected, we're all one, we're all part of a unifying principle under its core or under the skin to its core. We're all essentially the same. And so there's a feeling that comes with it. You can experience it through mysticism, through the use of psychedelics, or in community, expressive, experiential community, and that's what Burning Man and transformational festivals are all about. And there's a political side, there's a religious side, and so, Cindy, my work in trying to understand this movement was more or less to grapple with what I would understand to be the cultural side of society shifting into this worldview of oneness. And that's what transformational festivals are about, celebrating oneness, celebrating this sense of being a part of something bigger than myself, feeling the energy, feeling the emotion that binds all of us together in this common experience.
Oh, it's so interesting. And, I kept thinking that it was more of this religious thing going on because of the rituals that they hold. But you were saying that it is also political. There's a political side. And do you mind sharing just a little bit? I know we're going to be talking about that later on, but just a little bit about what that means, the political side to it?
Well, the political side of oneness comes out in all kinds of different ways at the United Nations and in other places. But what I'm seeing in terms of transformational festivals and the cultural side, it creates its own, it's not a hard politics. In fact, it was being described to us as liquid democracy. It's moving, it's shifting, and it comes through what we're all experiencing. We take that home with us, we take that back to our own communities, and then we try to inject that into our workplace or into our own home or our own community and environment. And so it's very decentralized. It's not a political movement per se, but there was a fair amount of talk, at least in the workshops that I attended, of looking at this as a form of decentralized, liquid, movable democracy. This is all of us coming together, working as one, with no real set bounds except for the 10 principles of Burning Man. But beyond that, no real set bounds. And look what we can do in the course of 8 days. We're all getting along. We're all making this thing happen. It's spontaneous, and yet at the same time, it's very intentional. And so that's kind of that. When I'm talking about the politics that goes with this, that's kind of flavoring. We're experimenting with a new way of doing kind of community. And so obviously there's politics that come with it.
Yes. Well, I could see that now. I'd like you to share, Carl, where the transformational festivals are being held, like Burning Man, and then tell us, how many there are worldwide, how many attend, name some of them, just so our audience has an understanding of what we're talking about. These are not small little festivals that we find in our small communities. These are intentional, like you said, and they're big. So let's start with, where are they held?
Oh, golly, all over the world, obviously. Yeah. This is a global phenomenon. That's one of the things that kind of turned me on to this, seeing that this is indeed an international movement of sorts. And so you have events like Burning Man, the one I attended in Nevada, which is kind of like a real trendsetter. It's the cutting edge of cultural transformation, and it has become that, especially in the last 10 to 15 years. So some of the other ones that are fairly well known are Lightning in the Bottle, which happens in California, British Columbia, in my country, Canada. Shambhala is a big one, brings in roughly 10,000 people. Glastonbury in England, which the Glastonbury Festival started off more or less just as a rock festival in the early 1970s, now has transformational elements to it. It wouldn't be considered directly a transformational festival, but there's enough of the transformational worldview, that feeling of oneness, that Burning Man and Glastonbury have been sending ambassadors back and forth the last couple of years. I don't know if they did it this year, but I know they did it last year and the year before. And Glastonbury is huge. 280,000 people show up for Glastonbury. Wow. In South Africa, you have Midburn, which is a regional Burning Man event that brings in thousands and thousands of people. Israel has a fairly extensive regional Burning Man event as well. Midburn is the one in Israel. The one in Africa is Africa Burn. So the movement itself is really a global phenomenon. The regional events that come with Burning Man are many and they're varied. I attended one in June of this year in Alberta, Canada. I attended our regional one for our area. And there was only about 1,000 people there, but it was a microcosm of what the Burning Man Festival was all about. And so it had the man that they burned. It had a temple. It had a temple burning ceremony and a temple burning experience. There were workshops. There was interactive art. There was a lot of sexual adventurism. It was really kind of wild and crazy. And in many respects, it was more crazy, at least had more of a crazy feeling to me, to be at this regional burn than even the big burn. As the big burn in Nevada had 70,000 people. And I mean, you just couldn't see or do everything. All you got was a sliver of what was actually going on. Whereas with the regional ones, you have more of a feel of what's happening everywhere within the regional festival.
So what they do is they introduce the huge Burning Man at these regional events. They kind of introduce you to it, to what their concept philosophy is or whatever, or maybe even their agenda, if you can see through all of it. And then the next thing you know, these people are going to the main festivals, the big ones. Wow, it's amazing. So that's a lot, of people that attend. So why so much interest in this type of festival, Carl?
Well, first of all, it's a reflection of the culture that's already here. So, and this is really important. These aren't hippies getting together. And I have been remiss in just jokingly saying, "Hey, I'm going to a big hippie festival." That's inaccurate language. It's not. In fact, that was the one thing, Cindy, that I really came away from at Burning Man. No, this is not a hippie festival. I didn't see a single hippie. Could you say there's a hippie worldview? Sure. But really, the people I saw your neighbors. I saw your family members. I saw your coworkers. That's who was there. These are not all just young people. So many of them are professionals. The demographics is varied. A lot of 30, 40-something age bracket people, a lot of people involved in the tech sector, professionals. When I was at Freezer Burn, I did a social survey on the ground and surveyed roughly 10% of that regional burn event. And the majority had bachelor's degrees. Many of them had master's degrees. So it's not an uneducated group. It's not a group that is social outsiders. These are people who are well connected and have to have a certain degree of connection and money anyways, because it's not a cheap endeavor. This is not a cheap activity.
It's very, very interesting. So, Carl, you said that they reflect the culture that's already here. We're going on a break. We'll be right back, so please stay tuned. We'll be talking about the culture that's already here with Carl Teichrib.
You're listening to Love for the Truth Radio. We'll be right back, so please stay tuned.
If you're a first-time listener, you'll find that on Love for the Truth Radio, we discuss news and views from a biblical worldview. We believe that the Bible is the inerrant Word of God and the absolute truth that should be applied to every aspect of life. We don't proclaim to have a cap on the truth, but we do have a love for biblical truth. So please, take everything you hear on this radio program to study and prayer. And thank you for listening to Love for the Truth Radio.
Welcome back. I'm Cindy Hartline, your host for Love for the Truth Radio. And with us is Carl Teichrib. We're talking about the Burning Man Festival. It's a huge gathering in the desert, often recognized as a hidden city that sets up camp for a week and then travels readily to another. And it exhibits many features that Carl is really sharing with us right now. Carl, you know, what we can do is we left off on the last segment about the reflection of our culture that's already here. Why don't we continue what you mean by that?
Sure. You know, my first event that I attended back in 1997, it wasn't a transformational festival. It was a special conference on restructuring Canada's education curriculum and looking to align it with the United Nations World Core Curriculum as put together by then United Nations retired official Robert Mueller. And what I came away with that, I mean, this is kind of the backstory. I came away from that event going, this worldview of oneness is already being embedded as global citizenship education. It's already being embedded in our school system. It's being thrust into our curriculum. It's in our textbooks. It's coming through to a generation, a new generation, the millennials and now Generation Z. It's being thrust upon them. And this is the worldview that they know. This, in fact, is really, in many respects, the only worldview that they know. And it's being given to them through our entertainment industry, certainly through our education system. And so this new generation is growing up, understanding themselves, first of all, to be global citizens. I'm interconnected. I'm part of the universe. The universe is in me. We're all stardust. And so this worldview is already being not just simply accepted, it is the worldview. It is the dominant, prevailing, though often unspoken worldview that is held by so many people. And in the year 2000 and the first couple of years of this last, of this new century, Burning Man and transformational festivals, Burning Man started to change. It adopted more of an art element. It adopted temples. The first one came in, I believe, in the year 2000. Burning Man itself started to change. The transformational festival movement, all of a sudden, about 2005, started to kind of pop up on the scene, more or less almost like an underground kind of movement of sorts, but it was already beginning to gain some traction. And then from 2008 on, I mean, if you wanted to start a business that had some profitability, appeal to that worldview and appeal to that age bracket, including, of course, those of us who are of Generation X, who kind of Generation X, the post-baby boomer generations who also had that worldview pushed on us in our school system to some extent as well.
That's interesting. So when people go to these festivals, it's already embedded in them to have this global worldview. But there should be other enticements there. I mean, I'm sure people aren't saying, well, let's just go because we all are of the same mindset. Do they realize that? Or what are some of the other enticements there? I mean, you had mentioned that Burning Man adopted temples and they adopted the arts. What else is there that they're going for, Carl?
Well, first of all, and you made a good point, they're not even really thinking about the worldview. They don't need to. I mean, it's already it's already in the back of their mind. It's already a germ seed that's there. They're not going regarding the worldview. They're going for the things that are enticing. They're going for the music. They're going for the lights. They're going for the sound. They're going for the feeling that comes as you are part of this immense and all-consuming energy over the course of 3, 5, or 8 days, or however long the festival event may be. And it is very, very attractive. I have friends, and I've interviewed them privately, who have played at some of the transformational festivals as musicians, became Christians later. And the one gentleman explained it to me this way. He says, it's just carnal joy. It's carnal joy. It's this feeling of freedom, a feeling like you now are with your own family, your own kind of people. And so people are coming for a lot of different reasons. Our camp at Burning Man, our neighbors, really nice people. Our neighbors, for the most part, were my age group, 40s, 50s. My immediate neighbor was a retired PhD holder. He had a friend from France, a younger man from France, and a younger lady from France who were visiting part of his camp as well. He was in his retirement age. He was coming just simply, he said, to get out of his skin, to be able to just sit around and veg for the week and just see the crazy, crazy stuff.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, I'll tell you what, just looking at some of the views online, just the people that attended there, it almost seems kind of wild, the way that they're dressed, but it just seems like a place that is out of this world. It's hard to understand that these people have the same mindset, but we can talk about that a little bit later. So,
right. And the important thing here, though, is to understand that they're all coming with different reasons. Yeah. And so, there's basically 3 kind of categories, just very broadly speaking. One, the partiers. They're just coming to party, to have a good time, to unwind. And then you have those specifically coming to things like Burning Man, who are the sexually adventurous. And there is definitely enough to feed those who are sexually hungry or sexually looking for some new directions. My goodness, there's lots and lots of stuff for that too. And then there's another side, and it's more of the serious side. You have social engineers, the tech gurus, the leadership of the Burning Man organization, the leadership teams that are there. They're seeing this in a different light. They're seeing this more of here we're having a model, an experiment in what our world could really and let's look at bringing these principles forward into the what they call the default world, your world, my world. And so there's these 3 broad categories of kind of people, and there's some overlap. Absolutely, there's overlap, especially everybody is there in terms of the celebration and the party, but people come for some very specific reasons as well.
Yeah. Well, why don't you take us on a tour of Burning Man? Well, no, first, Carl, I wanted to ask you this. Why did you go? What was the reason you went to Burning Man? What did you want to obtain from going?
Well, yeah, that's a very fair question. Number one, as a researcher, somebody who believes in actually doing on-the-ground research, it's important not just simply to look at web pages or YouTubes or to read books or articles, but to interact in very personal ways. And sometimes that includes going to events. Sometimes that includes not necessarily going to events, but interacting with private interviews and deep discussions with players, those who are involved. But when I can, I look to attend. I look to put boots on the ground so that I can have a proper perspective, literally be that witness to the event and have a better grounding of what's really taking place. That's one side of it. The other side was I had a friend come with me. His name is Robert Worley. And Bob and I, we had another reason for coming as well. We set up a sign at our tent. And the sign was, it said this, Camp of the Unknown God, which is really out of Acts 17. And so we also wanted to engage people with the gospel. We wanted to engage them with questions of truth and religion and philosophy and Christianity. And so over the course of those 8 days, we had not a ton of conversations, but we had a number of really meaningful talks with our neighbors and with people walking by who went, hey, what's this all about? What's this Camp of the unknown God. What unknown God? What are you talking about? And it really opened up some great doors. We only had one person who walked away going, Jesus Christ? No. As soon as we brought up Jesus for one individual, pardon me, he was gone. But all the others were like, no, we want to hear more.
Oh, that's awesome. So you never know. So take us on a tour, Carl. Like what would one see at Burning Man? If you were to take us as a tour guide, what would we see?
First of all, you would see a long, long line of vehicles to get into the place. We got in on Sunday afternoon. We drove in around 3 o'clock. We sat in our vehicles, and of course we were outside of our vehicles too, but we were stuck in this lineup. And this is part of the mystique of Burning Man. We were part of this lineup for about 4.5 hours, maybe 5 hours, and that wasn't even too bad. The night before, at 2 in the morning, we had heard this from other participants. From 2 in the morning, people were showing up, and they weren't even getting in until 10 in the morning. The lineup was so backed up. So the first thing you're going to experience is tremendous heat. Our coolest day, I think, was 100 degrees.
Oh, my goodness.
You're going to see and experience dust. The moment you walk out, you're not in a sand desert. You're in a dust desert. It's powdery, it's white, it's absolutely glaring under the sun. And so the first thing, Cindy, that hits you is just the physical power of that place. You know you're in a spot where if you don't bring your water, you don't bring your shade, you don't look after yourself, you're in trouble.
Wow. Well, that's very interesting. So what were some of the foods, the sights? I mean, just if you were to take pictures, if you were snapping pictures with a camera, what would you see?
Well, and I did snap a number of photos because it's a photographer's haven. There's so much to see. First of all, the streets. You are in a city, and this is important for your listeners to know. You are in literally a city. I would recommend people go on, Google Image or whatever your favorite website is for pictures and type in Burning Man City and get an overview of it. It is literally a city. We had 70,000 people.
Wow, that's crazy.
And so we have streets. They're all laid out in a radial grid, so they follow a clockwork. And then we had streets that ran the length of it. And because this year's theme was radical ritual, our street we were on was Kundalini. So we were on 5 and Kundalini. So if you get a map of Burning Man for 2017, which you can do online and look up 5 and Kundalini, you'll know roughly where I was. You see lots of tents, you see lots of RVs, you see all kinds of big shade structures being set up. There's always dust blowing. People are always wearing bandanas or dust masks. You have to. People have goggles. You have to. A variety of dress. It could be anything from fake fur to feathers to on Tuesday. Tuesday was Tutu Tuesday. So many of the guys were wearing tutus. So, I mean, it was just an explosion of different things to see.
We're going on a break, so please stay tuned. The best is yet to come.
You're listening to Love for the Truth Radio. We'll be right back, so please stay tuned. Many would agree that we are living in unprecedented times. Grave immorality is on the rise, as in the days of Noah and Sodom and Gomorrah. There are wars and rumors of wars as nations rise against nations. Prophecy is being fulfilled as the birth pangs become quicker and harder. These are the signs of the return of Jesus Christ. There is one sign often left untaught. Jesus also told the disciples in the Olivet Discourse to take heed that no man deceive you. This warning applies to us too. Deception has infiltrated the churches through many false teachings and movements, making apostasy paramount. As contenders of the faith, we do our best to research and discuss these false teachings for you, the listener. Thank you for having a love for the truth.
Welcome back. With us is Carl Teichrib. We're talking about transformational festivals and particularly Burning Man. If you've never heard of Burning Man, Carl's giving us a very detailed view or vision of what it's all about. But anyway, Carl is currently working on his forthcoming book, Game of Gods, The Temple of Man in an Age of Re-Enchantment. It's great. I've had the opportunity to read some of his chapters, and quite honestly, Carl, they've been mind-blowing. In fact, I have to read them over and over and over again because they're wonderful, they're deep. Just the way you write is amazing, and I appreciate that you forward them to me, and I have to get them back to you, by the way. You know, Carl, before the break, we were talking about what you see when you are at a festival, particularly like Burning Man. You know, how were the people dressed? And, you know, explain that to us.
Well, it's like the movie Mad Max in some respects. Like I said, there is just so many different varieties of how people dress or undress, because there's a fair amount of nudity as well. But it's not just simply how people are dressing or how they're expressing themselves, because that's what they're doing. They're looking for a creative way to express yourself. It's more than that. The artwork you see, there's tremendous artwork, and it really is amazing artwork. The detail, the time that has gone into it, the money that gets poured into some of the artwork. The temples, the various structures that are erected. The man this year was in his own temple. The temple was called the Temple of the Golden Spike, and the man was placed within that temple itself, and it was a large, a very elaborate structure. In fact, this is one of the reasons why I really felt this year I had to go, because the subtitle of my book, as you said, is The Temple of Man in the Age of Re-Enchantment. And standing out in what's called the playa, the desert area in the center of the sea, because the city creates like a letter C effect. In the center of this big C is the man and his temple that stood there going, this is a subtitle of my book. It's right here. It's this massive 105-foot high, huge temple with this man inside of it. All the creativity you see around it, the costuming, all the shrines. And there were, I think, 20 shrines placed around the temple. Some of it was play. Some of it was mockery. Some of it was just fun. Some of it was very, very serious. And that's also part of the Burning Man experience, understanding what is mockery. What is theater, what is play, and what is serious, because you realize very quickly that all three are happening all around all the time. Yeah. The lighting is incredible. You will not see a city lit up like this. Think of downtown Vegas with its light show, and then spread that out over the Black Rock Desert. Except everybody's doing it on their own, and you'll get a sense of what that might look like. Or take a look at the pictures online at night. It's literally a spectacular display of lights and strobes and spotlights, lasers, and of course fire. There's fire coming, fire everywhere. There's lots of fire acts. There's art cars shooting massive balls of fire. And when I'm saying art cars, that's also part of what you're seeing. Very incredibly built vehicles. Wow. For example, across the street from us was a 2-story church, the Church of the Open Mind, being built on what would be the chassis of like a big rig. And so here you have this 2-story church all of a sudden start its engine and go down the road with stained glass, a steeple, the whole bit. Inside had pews, and you could go and walk up the nice white stairs going up into the church, because it was literally a church building set up on basically a large truck rig, and it would slowly drive off out into the desert.
That's crazy. That is insane. So people can actually fit in this church. They can walk up the steps and go inside. They can sit at the pews, and it's on this big truck or flatbed thing.
Right. And so crazy. I mean, you don't even see, with this one, you didn't even see it was a truck underneath. My friend Bob and I, we were fortunate. We were allowed to go up on top of that art car to watch the man burn, and then to watch the temple burn. when the man burned, I counted on the top, we had, I think, 35 or 40 people on the top floor of the church.
That's interesting. So, you said, Carl, that they're not worshiping anybody or anyone per se. Basically, it's spiritual secularism, and yet they're basically worshiping their higher self. But now they have all these rituals. There's this burning man. There's churches. They're even defined as, quote, churches and quote, temples. So, what is the main focus and agenda?
For those who are in the more the leadership side, for those who are involved more on the social change side, they see Burning Man as representing a shift in consciousness, a shift in thinking. And it's often said, people who go to Burning Man and events like Burning Man, but Burning Man specifically, come away with almost like a conversion experience. And I've heard that. I've talked to people who've said, yes, this changed my life. This has had such a profound impact in my world. To them, it becomes a religious type of activity. Even though it wouldn't be properly classified as religious, it would certainly be considered a type of spiritual secularism. But the spiritual is certainly there. There's no question about it. In terms of churches and some of the things you see, I didn't see anything mocking Buddhism. I didn't see anything really mocking. I didn't see anything mocking Hinduism. I didn't see anything mocking Islam. But I saw a lot of mocking of Christianity.
Isn't that amazing? So there it goes right there. And what really, to exalt ourselves is really exalting, I would say, Satan, because he's the father of lies, right? And, disguising himself, though, through these kind of venues. And, Carl, I remember one of our last shows, we talked about the attendees gathering in one place to sing, dance, recite mantras, which seem to be one of the central features or centered features where, quote, harmony begins. Now, that was like in the past. Is that still happening? Do they gather these people? It's a city now. Do they gather them in one place and bring them to dance and recite and sing?
You still have that in certain areas. I mean, here's the thing to keep in mind with Burning Man and with all transformational festivals in general. They're not monolithic events. It's not just one person saying, hey, we all have to go do this now. And instead, what you have hundreds of events all happening within the course of that container. And that's how they view the festival. This is our container to do all these things. So yes, in fact, at the Man on Sunday night, Bob and I, we caught just a part of it, but we caught the ritual to open up the Man. And it was hard for us to actually see much of it because there was so many people packed around trying to see it. But they had a ritual to open up the temple of the Man. And over the course of the week, there was other rituals throughout the event. In fact, there was just so many things happening. You could only catch, kind of a sliver of what was really taking place. But yes, there was rituals. I was at the temple, the other temple, and watched as people did private rituals as well. And then there were rituals that were put in the event guidebook saying, hey, meet at this certain time. We're going to have this ritual. I actually went out one afternoon because I wanted to catch a ritual procession that would take place from center camp, walk out to the desert, to the Man Temple, and they were going to do this kind of this ritual built around the idea of finding a sacred connection with the Man. And I got out there, and I was waiting for it, and we had a huge dust storm that blew in, and the dust storm lasted for probably 30 minutes, and this is on Monday. The dust storm was phenomenal. You couldn't move. You ended up just standing there for like 20 minutes beside your bicycle. And by the way, you need a bicycle there because the place is huge. And when it was all done, nobody showed up. I mean, they didn't have it because the dust storm, from what I understand, canceled that event.
Wow, that's interesting. Now, was that the burning of the Man, or no? That was something else.
No. That was early in the week, and that was
early in the week. Okay.
Yeah, and that was just one group that had put a notice out that they were going to conduct this ritual, and it didn't happen, from what I gathered, simply because, I mean, the dust storm was so phenomenal. But the ritual of burning the man, and they do call it a ritual. I mean, that is a part of. I mean, it's not a part of it. It is the climax.
Yes.
Besides the temple burn the next night. And the sad part was, and not just sad, the tragic part was that on Saturday, when they burnt the man, and toward the end of the burn, when the structure was starting to collapse, a 41-year-old individual broke through the ranks of the fire guards and ran inside the fire and perished.
Oh, that's a shame.
They were able to drag him out. He remained alive until Sunday morning, and I believe about 6:00 in the morning or 6:30 he passed away.
Wow. So that's a shame, Carl. And I think we've talked about this before. I've heard that this has happened before. But the burning of the man, is that just to get to your inner self or to start anew? What is the thought on that? Because we're talking about a shift in thinking, a conversion experience. So is that the conversion experience that makes this a transformational festival? Is dying to man or dying to who you are, or?
No, it's actually almost the last part of a week-long series of different encounters that you will have as an individual. That when it all takes place, number one, when it takes place, it's exciting. You've got flames higher than you've seen before in your life. I mean, this is a massive burn. You've got so much energy. There's so much lighting. There are strobes and lasers everywhere. It is a massive party. 70,000 people are gathered to celebrate this. And so that act itself kind of becomes the cornerstone for this edifice that you've now experienced, this building that has happened within your own consciousness, within your own soul. For a lot of people, it just simply is kind of the end of a week of partying. For a lot of others, it has a meaning that says, okay, this is us expressing ourselves, and it's us having that experience together as that community. We're burning the man. We're doing this act together. What I really found, though, to be far more spiritually motivating was the temple, which was just further down the desert, roughly 100 feet high, a little over 100 feet high. They had a massive temple, and all week long, this became the epicenter for people's emotions and spiritual outpourings.
We're going on a break. We'll be right back to continue our discussion on Burning Man with Carl Teichrib. So please stay tuned.
In 2 Timothy chapter 3, we read that men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, without self-control, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. They will be ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Thank you for having a love for the truth.
Welcome back. I'm Cindy Hartline, your host for Love for the Truth Radio. With us is Carl Teichrib. We've been talking about Burning Man, the transformational festival that actually brings about a paradigm shift that is sweeping our Western world to globalism. Let me read this to you. It says, one promo that I picked up reads that Burning Man isn't your usual festival. It's a city wherein almost everything that happens is created entirely by its citizens who are active participants in the experience. Even though it's huge, and I know it's set up like a city, but it seems like it's intentional that it is called a, quote, city. And I heard you say that they had ambassadors from one festival coming over to the other festival. So why are they calling it a quote city? I know it's a community and it's a gathering, and they're feeling close as I don't know how to say it, a tribe or whatever. But why call it a city?
Oh, because it is a city. It does have the features of a city. You have street layouts. You've got infrastructure. They literally have a public works department that looks after the city itself. Physically, it is a city. And so that's why it's referred to so often as a city. It's referred to as a community. It's also referred to as home. I was told on a number of occasions, welcome home. You have that type of language used throughout the course of the week. But yes, it is physically a city. There is purpose in how everything is laid out, because with 70,000 people, it can't be helter-skelter, and it wasn't.
That's interesting. So there's a lot of time, energy, and technology put into this type of festival. I mean, these are serious people that run this thing.
Oh, it's very serious, yes.
It sounds very serious. And it's like you said, it's very, very organized. What were some of the activities or sessions or workshops that were being offered?
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up, because there are so many opportunities to go to different workshops, lectures, to hear different speakers. I went to Camp Soft Landing, which is kind of a bit of a famous camp for people in the psychedelic community, and I attended a few of the lectures that they were giving on psychedelics. Some of the workshops they were attending included things. I've actually got the list in front of me. I'll read you a few. Some of these I attended, some of them I didn't. The Struggle for the Sacred, psychedelic sex work, psychedelics and healing and your relationships, how to make it in psychedelic futurism. I did attend that with Daniel Pinchback. Updates on psychedelic research, rational ritual and pragmatic mysticism. Those are just some of the ones that you could attend if you went to Camp Soft Landing. And attended what they call the Planque Norte lecture series. Bob and I attended a lecture at the Shaman Dome. There is a camp, a large village camp set up with multiple domes. One of them is a shaman dome. So you walk in, and we had 3 shamans who talked to us about shamanism, psychedelics, and neuroscience. And when it was, just to show you how eclectic this place can be, Bob and I are in this almost 2-hour-long workshop on shamanism and psychedelics. I mean, it's serious stuff. We walk out of it, and literally across the camp, there's another camp, a different camp, but it's right there in you can see it. And here they've got ballerina practice, and they're doing ballerina. Guys in tutus. Oh my goodness. And it was just, I mean, Bob and I we were just, in this door, enter this door for shamanism and psychedelics. Enter that door for ballerina dancing.
It's nuts. It's nuts.
So it's wild.
It is wild. It seems like the people just are kind of getting all fleshed out. It's very carnal, like you said. But what, Carl, is the struggle for the, quote, sacred? What is sacred to the people there? What are they struggling toward?
That's a really important question. To so many of the attendees, the entire experience becomes to them a sacred moment, and really, though, where the epicenter of that is the temple itself. And over the course of the week, people go to the temple. It's an amazing structure, and they're leaving notes. They're writing comments. They're expressing themselves. They're pouring out their feelings. They're pouring out their anger. They're pouring out all of their emotions at the temple. And you go there, and the temple is a quiet place as everybody is engaged in writing or in meditating or just sitting and reflecting on their life. And that has become such an important part of the Burning Man experience. It's, in fact, in many ways, it supersedes the importance of the man. The man has become the celebration. The man has become the party. The temple has become the spiritual, sacred hub. And so if there's a sacredness to it, it's what people build into the temple as they're going to pour out their grief. And people were literally pouring out their grief there. I watched. It was very sobering. It was very sad. It tugged at your heart because you knew these are people who are. This is the only place where some of them are finding purpose or release or any sense of healing or any. I'm like, oh wow, we've rejected Christianity. We rejected Jesus Christ. We will have to replace with something. And so that's what this is. This is an alternative. It's a replacement. So when the temple burnt on Sunday night, the feeling was totally different. It wasn't a party. There wasn't music. There wasn't strobes and lasers. It was just quiet watching as the temple went up in flames. And the lady beside me was crying. She was weeping through most of the burn. It was this very sad, very serious, very solemn place.
It seems like it preys really totally on the soul. I mean, the emotions of the soul. But yet, Carl, just for our listeners, so that we are not promoting Burning Man, that we are Christians, and I started thinking about that, that we're just shocked that this is, again, sweeping the Western world, these festivals, and they are transformational, and they are changing lives, and they are producing a kind of culture that is about self. Finding the inner self is the way that I see it. Carl, it says that the Burning Man festival itinerary that I looked up also included pavilion shrines and processionals. Shrines invite participants to engage with the sacred and leaving offerings. So they're written, thought, spoken, song, or secret. There seems to be a deeper spiritual aspect that's going on here, almost a type of worship. Now, we talked about that it wasn't worship, that there's a form of spirituality, but not really. There's not one God. There's just everything and anything you feel like giving your heart and your mind to. To me, that's a type of worship because our lives depict what we worship. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're right. They would not say it's worship. They would say this is sacred, but really it's just mixing around the language.
Yes.
And what it is a type of temporary or pseudo-spirituality. I had a conversation with a young Russian artist, not a Christian at all. He came to our camp. He was seeking, he was searching, and we had a long, long discussion about Christianity. And I said to him, look, at the end of the week, all this is going to burn or get packed up and put away.
That's right. Yeah.
So this as a spiritual expression is just temporary. That's all you've got is this temporary spirituality. Maybe then it's not real spirituality. Maybe what you're experiencing are no question. You're experiencing feelings, you're experiencing emotions, and you are experiencing some type of spirituality. I'm not gonna deny that. But is it a true spirituality that comes from knowing your Creator, from knowing the fact that you are a child of God? No, this is a different thing altogether. This is an alternative spirituality, and it is temporary. It is temporary. People walk away from it, from this event, longing to return because this is their home, or they walk away sometimes going, this was an overwhelming experience and it's changed my life. I've got a conversion experience out of it. A lot of people will say that, and so while it's not, you can't call it a religion. It is certainly has that spiritual side to it. In this event, because it was called Radical Ritual, you saw that ritualistic, spiritualistic sacredness played out all throughout the event.
That's interesting. Let me read something for our audience. It's by Krista Tippett. It was, again, on one of the promos online in reference to Burning Man. We are among the first peoples in human history who do not broadly inherit religious identity as a given, a matter of kin and tribe like hair color and hometown. But the very fluidity of this, the possibility of choice that arises, the ability to craft and discern one's own spiritual bearings is not leading to the decline of spiritual life, but it's revival. So there's a revival going on here. And you know what I would say, Carl, is I think it's demonic. It definitely isn't Christ. It's not, there's nothing there that depicts the character of Jesus Christ or God the Father as we know him. What's interesting is you said that they don't mock any other religion but Christianity, and yet I've heard you say that there are Christians that do attend. What's going on as far as mocking Christianity?
Well, a good example is just even the art car across the street from us was, but it was meant to be, it was a shot taken at Christian institutions. There was one art piece, and Bob and I watched as people interacted around it, and it was a cross. It was a cross that was lit up, and you could go over and you could stand in front of the cross. You could grab hold of what would be the nails, and you could wrap your hands around it so it looked like you were crucified on the cross.
Oh boy! Okay.
And at one point in the evening, a young man walked up who was dressed as a nun, bowed before it, venerated it, did the pose as if somehow he was in a Catholic church, or because he was dressed up as a Catholic nun. And then he went and he hung himself on the cross, and it was all outright mockery. The whole thing was mockery.
Yeah.
So you had that kind of mockery that was there. I like I want to go back real quick to the quote you read because it's a very important quote. Krista is right. We aren't seeing a decline in spirituality. The secular worldview, the idea of modernity and secularism and raw materialism, that hasn't led to the decline in religion or the decline in spirituality. In fact, it's forced us or caused us to seek it even more. And so we've rejected Christianity as a culture. And now we're finding ourselves even rejecting things like hardened materialism. And instead of creating a completely non-religious environment, we have people now hungry for religion and specifically for their own self-made spiritual identities. That's the idea of re-enchantment. That's the concept of now I'm finding my purpose in the earth, I'm finding my purpose in myself, I'm finding my purpose in my community. This becomes my spiritual identity. It becomes a part of my spiritual exercises that I may do. So spirituality is alive and well. Christianity needs to confront this and understand this.
We're going on a break. Please stay tuned. Carl will give us his contact information and advice.
You're listening to Love for the Truth Radio. We'll be right back, so please stay tuned.
Welcome back. I'm Cindy Hartline, your host for Love for the Truth Radio Philadelphia. Look us up on loveforthetruthradio.com. We air programs via stream every day. You can find program archives with contributors John Haller, Chris Quintana, Carl Teichrib, Patrick Wood, guests like Bill Koenig, Ray Youngin, Johanna Michelson, Bill Salas, and Jan Markell, and many more veterans of the faith with the voice of truth. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud, and on Rapture Ready Radio on Monday evenings on Blog Talk Radio with Jackie Alnor, along with numerous web radio programs who air us on their stations worldwide. Welcome back. We're in our final discussion with Carl Teichrib. It's been wonderful, Carl. You've given us a lot of information, but you know what? There's a lot of Christians out there that's saying, wow, I didn't know this was happening. Maybe my kids are going to this. Maybe relatives are going to it, and I didn't know what it was really all about. I've heard of it. So give us some final advice. What should Christians do? Should they be a part of it, not be a part of it? What are your thoughts?
My thoughts on this is, for the majority of Christians, no, you shouldn't be. This isn't our place. This isn't our place. Where it is our place is if we take something like an Acts 17 approach, like Paul at Mars Hill. And that is the approach that we took, Bob and myself, in setting up our camp, which is going there literally to talk to people when the opportunity arises, to give them the truth of who the unknown God is. This is literally a type of modern Mars Hill. And so that's an approach that is well worth considering if you have an apologetics ministry and you understand what already this is all about. But otherwise, this is what the world is doing. And as I said in the beginning of the show, it's a reflection of where our culture already is. And so whether your family goes to Burning Man or not, or your neighbors go or not, they may already have that worldview of oneness embedded in their own thinking. And so we need to already be aware of just that, and then move from that out into our communities, out into our own families, and into our places of influence, and be able to give the gospel and have a reason for why we believe when the world is accepting this nebulous idea of oneness.
Yes, and we know that the only oneness that we have is with our Lord Jesus Christ. And if you read in John 17, it was the prayer that Christ gave to his Father, that he prayed that as he and the Father were one, that those that were following him would glorify him by being one in them. So that's the oneness that we as Christians search for, seek for, worship, love, is one in Christ and with his Spirit, not any other spirit. So Carl, how can someone get in touch with you?
Well, they can find me on social media, Facebook and Twitter. Just do a search. You can do it either on my name or through Forcing Change. Our Forcing Change website is not up right now. It hasn't been up for a while, but Lord willing, it will be back up sometime in the near future. But definitely through social media. That's the best way at this point to get a hold of myself.
Thank you, Carl Teichrib. It's been wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for all of your research, your sacrifice, and your information to us. Thank you, audience, for listening. Stay tuned for next week.